And I said, what's the future for our bank? And I was a young product manager, and we hadn't started the acquisitions quite yet. There was a couple, but not many. And he said, Bill, if we don't grow this bank, neither you or I are going to reach our potential here. If we do, we will. And I thought, wow. I mean, that was a great leadership statement to me. So here was the senior guy saying, look, if we don't get this done together, neither of us are going to get anything out of it.
Right.
And it lit my fire. It really did.
Welcome to Your Next Big Project is You, a podcast based around the theme of time. Time to be able to press pause on life. Time to reevaluate what's important. Time to reminisce about where you've come from, what you've learned, and what you've accomplished. Time to revisit your goals, dreams, and vision. And time to remember the people in your life. That's it, my friends. If you've got time, fasten your seatbelt and listen in as we discuss opportunities for the next 5 to 25 years of your life. And remember, your next big project is you. Welcome to our podcast. I've got a very special guest today. How many times can you think about somebody that you met almost 50 years ago to the day, right? And it's probably might even be the title of this episode. You got the time, because that's how my guest here, one of my dearest friends, Bill Mabee, is joining me for this podcast today. Thank you so much, Bill. I really appreciate the time today.
Thanks, Leo. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you. I've enjoyed seeing some of your prior podcasts, and I've loved tracking your work. It's been great.
Well, I especially know Bill from many years ago because we used to love going over to the gym and shooting hoops together and things. But over the years, I've gotten to really know Bill as a devoted husband, as an amazing father, an adoring grandfather, a son whose mother's picture is literally right behind him on the right over his right shoulder there and things. I mean, how cool is that? And Bill, you rose the ranks at M&T Bank and then started your own venture and joined a strategic partner that assisted the bank on many projects, but many, many years of leading the marketing and branding efforts at M&T. And I just remember all of the journey. I remember all of the crossroads or the next new assignments and the areas that you're going. Tell us more about it from your perspective.
Yeah, Leo, we are going back about 50 years. Wow. We both, graduated from St. Bonaventure University, and neither of us were from Buffalo, and I certainly wasn't, but I took my first job there right out of school as an English major, and actually in the investment world. Well, it's interesting because I was in it only 6 or 7 months in a town I knew no one in, and I realized that job wasn't for me. And that was the first milestone for me. I had to decide what I didn't want to be. And I had no prospects. And oh, by the way, the woman I met at St. Bonaventure, who I was then going to be marrying in 5 months, I had to tell her I just quit my job in Buffalo, and I had no other idea what I was going to do. But then through some help from some St. Bonaventure graduates, I started at a very entry level at M&T Bank in Buffalo, New York, and in the collections department. And I'll just say this, it's kind of interesting, I think. We were a $700 million bank, the fourth largest in Buffalo when I joined. Not really important. When I left 30 years later as the chief marketing officer, we were 70 billion and the 20th largest bank in the country.
Wow.
So that was in 30 years. So, and it was quite a ride from point A to point B.
Let's talk about that ride a little bit. My gosh, I remember you working in an old office before you even moved downtown to headquarters. That was even a big move in your life.
Absolutely.
To do that. But you saw firsthand how leadership operated with a company with significant growth plans. It was an acquiring organization, right? In terms of a lot of banks that you acquired in the Northeast, and then obviously eventually down in the Mid-Atlantic area. You had a hand in that with each assignment in terms of different roles and responsibilities that you were playing out as well. I'm curious on some of your thoughts on leadership. Um, some of the challenges of integrating new cultures along the way to go from 700 million to $70 billion. What were some of the key learnings you could share from that perspective, Bill?
Well, yes, we were, and M&T continues to be an acquisitive bank, and that's what made it all work. As such, growth was so important. Growing the bank was important, and our chairman there, the late Bob Wilmers, he insisted on variable pay as the biggest part of our compensation from when I was a junior person all the way up, because if we don't grow it, we don't grow, and as individuals. So that was something I've always been a believer in that. But I did learn something early on. I was in my 30s, and I was going to make a transition from that bank to another, and I wasn't sure what to do. And I talked to one of the senior people there, and I said, "What's the future for our bank?" And I was a young product manager, and we hadn't started the acquisitions quite yet. There was a couple, but not many. And he said, Bill, if we don't grow this bank, neither you or I are going to reach our potential here. If we do, we will. And I thought, wow. I mean, that was a great leadership statement to me. So here was the senior guy saying, look, if we don't get this done together, neither of us are going to get anything out of it.
Right.
And it lit my fire. It really did. So then I went on. I was very lucky, Leo, because I was in the product areas and I grew up through marketing. So every due diligence from the smallest bank all the way up through later, I was a part of. And then as I became part of the senior team, bigger roles in that. But I felt like my hand was in almost every acquisition from the small ones all the way up in one way or another.
The operative phrase, Bill, that you just said is it lit my fire. And when you talk about the late, great Mr. Wilmers and his storied history in banking and what he did with his vision for M&T Bank and things, you were right there firsthand seeing this. And I love the approach, the variability, that we've got to grow it and we can participate in the growth. It really, to me, it reinforced an entrepreneurial culture within an organization, because it gave you ownership in terms of, if I do my job and if I look at this as if I own a piece of this organization, if I can elevate my game in our department to align to the rest of the organization, my gosh, look at what we can accomplish. And you guys did it. You did it, buddy. Yeah. So the one thing that stands out to me as well, I remember at the time when M&T was making a pretty significant investment in the mid-Atlantic region of the United States, specifically headquartered down in Baltimore with the home of the Baltimore Ravens. You were literally leading the charge there. I know, because I remember the day you called me, and I think you'd returned from Hawaii from the NFL Pro Bowl with one of your kids as a guest of the Ravens. Tell us about that whole journey of developing branding rights, and what were some of the communicative issues, the negotiation that you remember. How did that shape your thinking still to this day, as well as assisted you when you left the bank and started working for yourself, as well as one of your former partners?
Yeah, Leo, thanks. That was really interesting on a number of levels. But first of all, you have to that culture we talked about. It wasn't easy to spend a lot of money at M&T Bank as the marketing guy. I never had a very big budget. I would drool when I talked to other CMOs at other companies and see what they spent as a percentage of assets. Okay. But when the opportunity came up, when we acquired M&T, was acquiring this, the dog finally caught the car kind of thing. It was this big bank entering the mid-Atlantic market, where Bank of America and other smaller banks, Provident Bank and others, controlled the market. Who was M&T Bank? Did a lot of research. It was in my purview to do that. No one knew who we were. They thought we were a New York City bank. It was all over the board. I called my contacts, the Buffalo Bills, and said, can you hook me up with the Ravens? I'd like to talk to them about being their official bank, like we are for the Buffalo Bills. I called. I talked to someone down there, actually Dennis Mannion, who's a terrific person in professional sports. Still to this day, we became very close. He said, Bill, you can talk to me about being our official bank, but we have naming rights available for the stadium. Our prior partner went defunct, and I said, well, I thought, but no way, there's nothing I can do about that. We're not spending, hundreds of, $100 million on something. I just wanted on and on. Well, he said, let us just pitch you. We have brokers. You're going to meet them. And they'll just pitch you on the other aspect you want as well. So I thought about it and I thought, well, what the heck? We're entering this market. We have no name recognition. How much money would I have to spend in advertising to even make a dent? I had my advertising people do work up the kind of numbers we'd have to spend. And over the course of about a week, I started to realize just to get in there is going to cost us a fortune. How much could the naming rights really be? And how could it tie into that endeavor? I talked to my boss and I said, I know this sounds crazy, but I think we should take a shot at this. And he said, wow, bring them up. So that's how that started. They came, they presented. That was in January. I learned a lot. We talked a little bit about everybody having skin in the game at M&T Bank, everybody on variable pay. We were all part of a senior team. Anyone in that group could come into your office, whether they were in charge of credit or risk or mortgage or whatever, could come into any one of our offices and say, Bill, I think you're making a mistake. And I heard that a lot when I was trying to spend money, $2 million for CRM. Are you sure this is worth it? Those kinds of things. A couple of my close friends on the management team told me, Bill, this is a mistake.
Wow.
It's $100 million they want. I said, no, I can do it for 70. I know I can do it for 70. They said, still. I said, I know I can do it for less and it's going to be worth it. Trust me. And I got more and more committed as I saw that the numbers really worked.
You think about it, 70 million at the time when you started a $700 million bank. That's 10% of an organization.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. There's kind of revenue. There's revenue and assets, but still, yeah.
Talk about visualizing what's possible.
Oh, yeah.
Thinking totally out of the box of a very conservative organization, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, extremely low-key conservative, and all of a sudden this big splash into this day. How many years has it been now? My gosh, I'm thinking about this. Every time you turn on the TV and you see the Ravens.
Oh, that was 2004. So yeah, it's been 19 years, and the deal's been redone. And I was fortunate enough; they called me even after I'd left the bank to dig through some of the old materials to redo it. It's a great relationship they have to this day. But one of the key learnings through that, Leo, is that as I got more convinced, and I put a presentation together for our entire management group, and it was market entry strategy, Mid-Atlantic. And it's hard to get the attention of our entire management group at a time when we're making this big acquisition and get an hour of their time to present a whole marketing plan. Included in it was this chapter called Unique Opportunity. But when I showed the cost, the CPMs for the market down there versus Rochester, Buffalo, all that, I mentioned, and Bob Wilmers later quoted at the analyst, that it would cost more to advertise in that market than it does in Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, upstate New York in total. So when I presented the deal, I got approval, maybe by a vote, to go forward with it. It was that close. But wow. I became more and more committed. I was committed then. I was committed at a price that I knew we wanted to pay. And honestly, it was $75 million over 15 years. But there was a point in the negotiation where they weren't budging. And I told my boss, I said, this is now early March and it had to be done by, March. I said, I don't think this is going to happen. I said, I know the value of this and I can't get them to move. He said, Bill, you're going to get it done and you're going to get it done at your price. I know you.
Well,
and I did. Well, I wanted 70. It was 75. But anyway, they were terrific partners to negotiate with. Everybody left the room a little uncomfortable, which is the best way to have a negotiation. But it ended up being a terrific deal. And we entered that market. And I mean, the rest is history. I think the bank's done a terrific job down there to this day, but it really gave a platform for expansion.
Yeah.
You
know what, to me, the takeaways, Bill, for people listening in on our podcast today is the vision that we all have. And I would encourage people listening to think about the vision you have, whether it's for your business, for your practice, whatever it might be. I would ask, what are the unique opportunities that sit on your desk today, right? That might change the course, the direction of your organization. If you have the courage and the conviction, the commitment to literally say, I'm going to figure out a way to get this baby done. Most people, most entrepreneurs, Bill, so many people that I talk to, other C-suite leaders, those are the signs of leadership that many times are not taught at Wharton or at some other business school and things like this. That courage, the conviction, the commitment to how the vision comes to line, being able to understand the variability, the what you need to do to separate yourself from the pack. You know, that's what this was all about. I mean, it's still paying off today. All of a sudden, you decide to leave M&T after these 30 years, and you end up starting WHM Strategic Marketing, which is, I believe, got your initials to the name here and things. But eventually, I remembered when you joined one of your former clients, Hawkeye slash Mosaic, is the president of that organization. And tell us more about the decisions you made to finally leave the corporate world, to put your stamp on your own entrepreneurial venture, to join an organization as a senior C-suite leader, to guide, to direct, to develop a strategic business plan, to be a representative, to help them to close new opportunities as well. What'd you learn from that journey? And when you think back on that part of your career?
Wow. Great question. Great questions. Let me say this. I left M&T after 30 years, and it was my goal I saw what was happening personally and professionally. I knew I could do more somewhere else. I wasn't going to be made president. My best friend was president. He was my age. They loved me. I think they liked me as the marketing guy. And they always said, gee, you're doing a great job. But I thought that's as far as I'm going to get. So I thought there was something more there. I did tell my wife, I said, you know, if we keep doing what we're doing, when we drive our son to college, I'm our second son, I think we can drive away. So we sort of had that as a goal. You know, we worked together to do that. And the numbers kind of worked out, but I knew I wasn't going to just stop working. I knew I could do something else. And I'll tell you something, Leo, you know this yourself when you went off on your own to start your business. One of the proudest moments I had in a number of years is when I left. I got called by a friend of mine who was a former colleague at M&T, a president of a bank up in Boston. He said, Bill, I hear you're on your own. I mean, I was only on my own for 2 weeks. He said, can you come out and help me? I said, sure. Flew out to Boston. I had nothing but I didn't even have a laptop with me. I think back then it was a BlackBerry and a pad in my brain. Worked with him for 2 days, came home. I don't know. Check shows up for $5,000. That's what it was going to be, right? I showed my wife that check. I said, I'm more proud of this check than the last bonus I got at M&T, because I showed up on my own without being senior vice president, director of marketing, with all the power of a big bank behind me. I'm just Bill Mabee helping out. And it proved something to me that I could go, just that one initiative proved to me that I had something to offer. And then that led to another engagement there. And then I went on. Well, anyway, Mosaic called me right away. They were my clients. They were and continue to do great communications work in times of acquisitions for banks. I had always hired them to do the work. They said, can you help us? So I was on a retainer with them. One thing led to another. And then they asked me to lead up their team as president. Mainly the two co-founders, the two women that found the business, said, Bill, we're trying to wind down. We need someone with your experience to go out and sell our story across the country. So finally, Leo, after a lot of years of not traveling very much, only in the mid-Atlantic, I found myself in California and Charlotte and everywhere else talking to Bank of America, Union Bank, Wells Fargo, big clients of ours, BMO, doing that kind of thing. So a big transition for me, and I loved it. Just loved it. So big change, and I was so glad I did it. Never looked back, never regretted.
Well, it must have felt like a seamless transition, didn't it? To in terms of the questions they asked the two ladies who started the company, in terms of their strategy, their vision, what level of commitment, conviction, that they had relative to their business growth and things like this. That's to me where it becomes just natural, based on going back into your memory bank, going back into your own virtual filing drawer cabinet, and say, I've been here before. I had a situation that mirrors this 15 years ago, or something I did 8 years ago with this organization we were acquiring. I can remember the discussion we had in the boardroom one day, things like that. So good for you, Bill. What a way to to elevate and to get that sense of pride in getting that individual $5,000 check versus a bonus or some stock options or other things that, that came on an annual basis. But the thing I always admired about you as well, I remember I would call sometimes and you say, yeah, I got to go to a board meeting and I'm involved here. And I knew the bank was very committed philanthropically, big time. And they encourage leaders like yourself to get involved. And here you are giving your time, your talent, and then your own personal treasure to the nonprofit community. And I'm curious how that touched your heart and soul, and if there was any volunteer work that you did that stands out above the rest.
Yeah, Leo, thanks. Again, Bob Wilmers, he really believed he was in philanthropy, and his team volunteering. He wanted it at all levels. He expected it at the senior level. I'll tell you, I have more notes from him in my career whenever I was named chairman or joined a board and became chairman for those things than I ever did for anything I accomplished for him at the bank. He wasn't one to give big strokes for that, but he'd say, congratulations, I see you're chairman of the board of the YMCA of Greater Buffalo. I see you're, on the board at Elmwood Franklin School I think the two things that stand out, I was in education, 2 schools there on the board, and the YMCA. I will say one thing I learned through all of that, and you talk about leadership. Running a school is a very, very difficult thing. People pay big tuitions at private school and they say, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much I'm paying. But when you see where those dollars go, you see how hard it is to make the numbers work. And the two things that make the biggest difference that I noticed was, of course, leadership at the top of those institutions, the president or the headmaster, and the board. And I say the board, not the whole board. It's like in any organization, one board member can make a huge difference on their own. You don't know which one it's going to be. But if you have one, and I remember a couple instances in both those school situations where a couple of people stepped up, had the big idea, really helped and really turned some things around.
Yeah.
So I would say, you and I are not the type to sit in a meeting quietly, but I see a lot of people that do. And I think you have to decide, am I going to be the one? Now, you don't go out there, shooting your gun off, 100 different directions, but, everyone has a chance to be that person. If their idea catches root and starts to grow, it can change an institution. I saw it happen so much. So I learned a lot about leadership just by being part of those kinds of organizations.
Bill, one of my other clients that says, if you're in, Leo, you're in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I know you're that type and I'm that type where if you're going to commit to something, I'm going to give you every ounce of my body, my energy, my intellectual capacity to make a difference here, because I'm not just getting it in to say, on my resume that I've joined this board and I'm doing this community work, when you know that there's a lot of people that unfortunately are like that. They're not given. And I agree with you 100% that it might be someone with just a unique perspective, a special talent that can motivate, that can inspire, that can invigorate other people to really make a change. So we should do this. It's almost the same way that Ravens contract, that all of a sudden you got a vision. We got to figure out a way to get this done. And that just goes over to that board work as well. If we just do this or make this decision on behalf of the school, the campus structure, the parental, support, the educational curriculum, the recruiting in terms of the differentiation, we can do this. And I agree with you. It's really fulfilling when you can get involved like that. Hey, Bill, the thing I believe I most love about our friendship is just watching you stay balanced. I know the family intimately. Jody, obviously, from same classmates going way back. Here you are now with some grandkids and 2 great sons that I know you're amazingly proud of and leading great careers themselves. How are you staying balanced through all of this? Keeping front and center family commitment and the things that you still want to achieve in the future for yourself and for Jody, for your wife.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny, isn't it? When you're tied up in your professional life day in, day out, working, and you're still in it, working those big hours, and um your skills and your energies are directed at the clients and at doing all the things you have to do to run that business. When you step away, and I like to say I created a glide path for myself into retirement with different things. You can sort of say, well, you're going to pursue your interests, passionate about golf, fishing. I love those things. But there are more challenges and opportunities out there that are actually tougher to master than the things that were easy for you or for me when I was at work. And one of those things is now there was more time and people absorbed that time, which I'm proud of. So think about it. People calling, asking, can you help my son or daughter make a connection here or there? I think I've done more resumes and more, helping people in that way. How can people calling with specific business problems and those kinds of things, just personally? Well, guess what? I had to think about how I needed to be different. I was outside of my comfort zone, if you will, or my areas of strength. I had to learn how to really, really listen to what the problem is, what the opportunity is, and think less about myself. I mean, when we're trying to advance our careers, we're still thinking a lot about ourselves and our families. Let's face it, right? Because you have goals. Well, now
Yeah.
my goals felt pretty well met. So what am I trying to do for this person, for my kids, for my wife? Thinking about yourself less is very difficult if you're kind of in an ego-driven world. Is that making sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I read a good definition of humility, and I thought it really is telling. And it said something like this: it's humility is not thinking less about yourself. It's thinking about yourself less.
Mm.
Right? Or less often, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
People think humility is, oh, you're giving up on yourself. No, you just think about yourself less.
Yeah. It's
So
almost like
taking
a
that
pause.
out,
Yeah, it's a pause
yeah,
at the end of that. Less.
yeah, yeah. So you think about that, and it's called, selflessness is kind of where that comes from. So anyway, that's a big thing. Putting yourself, being less judgmental. I mean, there are a lot of things that I find were a waste of energy. Being judgmental, worrying about what happened. We read a lot about these things. How we react to situations is really important. So I think I've tried to spend more time, and I do some reading on it, and I try to advance myself in those areas. And I find that I'm more helpful to people that need my help or ask for my help. I don't know if they need it, but they ask for my help by developing those skills. I hope that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that definition for all of us listening in on this. And just a final question here. My heart and my soul is oriented with a good amount of my work focus today and helping people to be the best version of themselves. As we started years ago on defining how people differentiate themselves to stand out in a crowded marketplace, and now it's elevated, I believe, as we both aged and are at the point of some life introspection of thinking more about living a life of significance and a life with no regrets, a life with abundance and gratitude and perspective and being our best and living our legacy. And I know from talking to you and staying close, you've got this ongoing quest continually for intellectual growth and introspection to be the best version of yourself. You read a lot, you share things with me. What are some of those principles that stand out to you today? The things that you are front and center thinking about in terms of your continued personal growth and how it's translating to your family and to friends like me. You've helped me to be better to ease my thoughts after a bad golf shot. To do this.
Yeah.
How are you
Yeah.
continue to do that on a day-to-day basis? Let's end with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Maybe it's been overused lately, but gratitude's a huge thing, and it really, it's the old thing. If you have trouble going to sleep, don't count sheep, count the things you should be thankful for, and there's something to be said for that. Gratitude beats fear. It's the opposite of fear, which is kind of an interesting thought. I just think that I think having gratitude for what we have, finding things, maybe in the midst of despair that we actually have to be thankful for is really important. You and I, as we grow older, we know people go through some tough things, some tough health issues and all that. And I know you've had to be supportive and wanted to be, as have I. So yeah, I just think that that those things are all important. And I heard something the other day. I was listening to an interview with Michael J. Fox, and we all know he's 61 years old and has Parkinson's, and his story is quite. And I'm just going to read. He said something because I wrote it down. He said, "With gratitude, optimism is sustainable."
Hmm. Well,
that's what he lives by, and look what he's been facing. So, I don't know. That's kind of where I am on that. And
well, Bill,
I admire your work and the things you're working on, and you're helping so many people in all these areas. So I'm tuned into what you're saying as well, buddy.
well, you continue to teach me new perspective on gratitude, thoughts on humility, to make us the best versions of ourselves to do this. I'm unbelievably grateful for such a long-standing, long-term friendship that continues to grow every time we talk. So I thank you for your time today, brother.
Right.
Stay well, stay healthy, and as I always say, stay close.
Okay, bud. Yes, absolutely. And same to you.
Thanks, man.